This podcast is part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, a program designed to help all podcasts reach their full potential. For information about joining the Robots Radio Rocket Club, check out robotsradio.net.
Hey all you heroes and champions, crows, pirates, and inquisitors. Welcome to the Dragon Age Lorecast. I'm Shelby.
And I'm Austin.
And we are so excited to bring you this podcast. Every episode, we'll be talking about a different topic in the Dragon Age universe. From the Maker to Lyrium to Aravels, we will cover it all. There will be spoilers. And always remember, swooping is bad.
Hey, Shelby.
Hi, Austin.
Are you ready to talk about some Dragon Age?
I'm so ready. It's been so long.
It really has.
So I'm really ready to get into it.
Yes. Well, when last we left our friends here, we talked about the countries of Thedas. And we finished all of those, and so as we start this new season in our life, we kind of thought it would be a good idea to go into the factions of the Dragon Age games. From the Grey Wardens, to the Chantry, to the Templars, to maybe some lesser known things like the Legion of the Dead, or the Silent Sisters, or things like that.
Yeah, so I'm super pumped to start this new series. I think it's going to be fun talking about all of our favorite factions, because we're going to talk about all of them, so we're going to hit your favorite sooner or later, and I think we're starting off with a really strong one today.
So who are we starting off with?
We are starting with the Grey Wardens, the first faction we meet.
Woohoo! The Grey Wardens.
Is that true? It's kind of true. Whatever.
It depends on your origin.
Oh, I guess that's true. That's true. Well, anyway, for most of us, I think most people probably met the Wardens first. So
It's definitely the first one we hear about.
Yeah.
With the whole intro to Origins. That's
true. And I think if you want to count like the Circle of Magi, that's technically a faction, sure. And I guess if you are a Dwarven casteless, you are part of the Carta, right?
Yes.
So, but anyway,
or at least working
generally,
for someone who is.
Right. But regardless, with the narrative of the games, the Grey Wardens are mostly the first one we meet. So let's start off like we always do with some fun facts. Are you ready for my fun facts, Austin?
I'm always ready. Always ready for fun.
Okay, so technically the Grey Wardens started in minus 305 Ancient during the first Blight, surprise, by a group of mostly former Tevinter soldiers. And as we know, the Grey Wardens, they are an order of warriors, and they're dedicated to fighting Darkspawn throughout Thedas, and they're really well known as like the heroes, and they're very much looked at as like, oh, you're exceptional when it comes to fighting Darkspawn. You are better than the rest of us at fighting Darkspawn. So that's one of the reasons why they're seen as heroes. So Grey Wardens first appeared in battle in the city of Nordbaden during this first Blight. And at least as of 930 Dragon, the numbers of the Grey Wardens were estimated to be between 1,200 and 1,300. But that does not include any Grey Wardens that are located in the Free Marches, Novara, Antiva, and Rivain. So it probably could be a little bit closer to 1,500 if we're just giving a generous estimate. But depending on your choices in Dragon Age Inquisition, those numbers could be a lot lower. And in fact, they probably are a lot lower. So let's just keep moving through. In like historically in Grey Warden recruitment, one mage from every circle is recruited, and Grey Wardens can literally recruit anyone they want as a result of the rite of conscription. And this is basically a right that allows them to recruit anyone they want, from nobility to convicted felons to anybody off the street. They can conscript anyone into the army. But they tend to resist doing this because it's pretty unpopular, and they really only participate in and use the rite of conscription during times of blight. Mm-hmm. Which I think makes sense.
Right. So I have a question, and this is more of a circle question. So it says one mage from every circle. Do the mages have like classes? Like, and when I say like classes, like a group that goes through their the harrowing at the same time, and they're like a cohort basically of mages, and so it's one from every group in each circle.
So I don't think so. Based on, and I say no because based on the origin, the mage origin, it seems like no, because you go through your harrowing in that origin, but then you have friends in the circle like Jowan who look to be around your same age who are like, oh, I can't wait for mine. It very much is an individual thing. And that's how you move from apprentice to actual mage. Mm-hmm. But I think it's something that probably could be done in the same season, but I don't think it's something like, oh, mine's today, yours is tomorrow, and then our other friends is the next day. I don't think it's back to back like that. I think it's a little bit more spread out.
It just seems one mage from every circle, even though I guess there's several circles, seems too few.
Yeah, I mean, you also have to think about how powerful mages are. Like, look at the battle of Ostagar. There were only a handful of mages there, like maybe 5 or 7. And they were doing a whole heck of a lot of work. So, yeah. I don't know. I think we could probably debate this for a long time.
Right. Okay. I was just curious. Let's keep going.
Okay. Well, my next little fun fact is actually kind of heartwarming. This made me smile when I first was researching it. Wardens keep a list of names of everyone who dies during their joining. And if you don't remember, the joining is the ceremony by which you become a Grey Warden, where you drink the Darkspawn and Archdemon blood concoction. And that's where you become a Grey Warden officially. So they keep a list of everyone who has died through this process. These casualties are very much regarded as being fellow Wardens. Even though they didn't survive the rite, the list of names is cherished and remembered as if they were full Grey Wardens, because they had intended to be. And I think that's really heartwarming.
That is nice.
So, the headquarters of the Grey Wardens is located in the Anderfells, which we talked about the Anderfells in our very last episode of Season 1. And their fortress is called Weishaupt. And I brought a quote that I wanted to read from The World of Thedas, Volume 1. And this is what it says about Weishaupt. During the height of the Warden's power, the stone compound housed thousands alongside a thriving stable of Griffons. Weishaupt is now a miserable, barren place and is home to only a few hundred wardens. The reigning first warden is rarely present, as he is said to be more interested in politicking and lining his pockets than fighting Darkspawn. With the power of the Anders King lessening as anarchy takes hold in the blighted nation, Weishaupt is growing as a symbol of authority in the region. Some whisper that the first warden aims to take power over the Anderfells for himself. This is seen by many wardens as an insult to the order that flies no flag but its own in protection of all peoples.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it very much paints a picture of Weishaupt and the Anderfels that is, I would say, nostalgic. It is not what it once was. The Grey Wardens are not what they once were. And even their fortress is not what it once was. So, and we knew that, obviously, with the Griffons dying out. But more than that, it seems like the soul of this order has been lost in favor of politics.
Well, I find it interesting in all of Dragon Age Origins and Awakening, we never meet the first Warden.
Yeah, we never do.
There's mention of him.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing. We don't really see him. And that, to me, I guess it is possible he didn't know that there was an archdemon in Ferelden because of Loghain limiting information. But I still think that's a big error on his part.
Yeah, I agree with that. But even looking into Inquisition, like, sure, okay, the Orlesian Wardens are being manipulated, right? But also, if your order messes up that badly, you'd think he would be out there, especially in Orlais, trying to, like, mend relationships and, like, coming to Skyhold to meet the Inquisitor and trying to fix things and make sure this doesn't turn into some huge scandal, which it absolutely has the potential to do.
Right. And, like, why are your Warden commanders operating with such independence?
Well, that is a thing, because the first Warden, has become so entwined into politics, they have to. Right. The Warden commanders, they have to. Otherwise, there won't be anyone to do the job, But we'll get into that a little bit more later.
Woohoo. Well, let's keep going.
Okay, so this is kind of a new segment. We normally transition from fun facts into, like, ancient history, but in a lot of our factions, we don't know ancient history, or there's just not ancient history. So instead, what we're going to do is transition into the structure of this group, at least if we know it. And for Grey Wardens, we do know they have a very clear structure and hierarchy. So at the top, you've already heard us talking about the first Warden, and the first Warden is at the top. And they permanently live in Weishaupt in the Anderfels. And before the Griffons were extinct, they had a lot of things to do. But now they are definitely more of a figurehead and are deeply involved in Anderfel's politics, specifically behind the scenes. And so because of this, most of the actual military command falls to the regional Warden commanders. So, first at the top is the first Warden. Right under the first Warden is what's called the High Constable. And they're the second in command. And they used to be the aerial commander of the Griffons and the Riders. But obviously that no longer exists. So what the High Constable does now is serves as the public face of the order. So they basically lead recruitment and they serve as an ambassador. And then the third rank is the Chamberlain of the Grey. And this is, like, not a military position, and it's also not really a public facing position. It is the senior archivist at Weishaupt, and so every Warden commander will send a yearly report to the Chamberlain about their regional group of the order, about what's been going on, what they've seen, their numbers, all that kind of stuff. And then next comes all of the Warden commanders, or also known as commanders of the Grey. So these are the top leaders of the group of Grey Wardens in a specific country. So, example, Warden-Commander Clarel was the leader of all of the Grey Wardens in Orlais. She was not the leader of all Grey Wardens, but she was of all Grey Wardens, specifically in Orlais. There has been very little communication between Weishaupt and the Warden commanders, at least in the past several generations. So they generally run their groups as they want to, which means that the Grey Wardens in Ferelden can be super different from the Grey Wardens in the Free Marches, which can be super different from the Grey Wardens in Orlais, and so on. Which is a problem. I mean, that's a huge problem to have. But a lot of our institutions, even here in our modern world, a lot of our institutions function like that too.
They do.
Anyway, so just under the Warden commanders are the Constable of the Grey. And basically, again, this is just the second in command to the Warden commander. They are often referred to as the Warden Constable. And those are most of the high specific ranks. Under that is what's called a senior warden. And this is just a formal title that's given to any veteran warden who has earned special notoriety for any reason, whether that's just length of service or you did something super heroic in battle against the Darkspawn or whatever. Most of the Constable of the Grey members come from senior wardens. And again, senior wardens can command a small group of wardens or undertake special missions. And I think we see this in maybe one of the chapters in Tevinter Nights. I might be wrong, but I get the feeling that is definitely something that happened.
Well, you definitely see this in, one, Morrigan comments about it. Because even though Alistair is not a senior warden, he is the senior warden in the group. And she comments why he isn't leading.
True.
The second thing is that when you go to Adamant Fortress and you come out of the Fade, and if you have made the heart-wrenching decision to leave Hawk in the Fade, and you have Alistair as a warden, or Loghain, all the wardens immediately turn to Alistair or Loghain for direction and leadership because they are the
senior warden.
The senior warden.
Right. And that makes total sense. I would too. So under the senior warden is the archivist, and this is just the archivist of the given branch of Grey Wardens. And then that's all of the main ranks. Under that are wardens or warden ensigns, which are just the rank and file, everyday warden. You pass your joining, okay, you're a warden now. So that's just everyone. And then the last two we have are acolytes, which are mage wardens, and warden recruits, which, as the name suggests, are those who have been recruited into the order but have not yet completed the joining.
Right.
So those are all of the ranks. Grey Wardens have a lot of ranks. Not all of the factions we'll talk about will have any ranks or this many. And it can be kind of difficult because they all sound similar. But First Warden is at the top, and it just kind of goes down from there.
Well, let's move on from here, and let's go into some of the history of the Grey Wardens, starting from the beginning, which I guess this is one of the oldest factions in Thedas.
Yeah, it definitely is.
So they've got a long history.
Yeah, there are a few that have more history, but not many. So they were founded during the first Blight. The first Blight had been raging for about 100 years when the Grey Wardens were founded, which is, I can't imagine living in those 100 years. That would be just the most terrifying time of no hope. They were absolutely a hope in the darkest time for Thedas. So during the first Blight, this was the Archdemon Dumat in minus 395 Ancient to minus 203 Ancient, which is almost 200 years. And the Grey Wardens were instrumental in this. And then let's move on a little bit. There's not a lot I want to just go through, and I don't want to go through all the blights because we've talked about that in previous episodes, but we are going to highlight just a few important things from each of them. So, in the second blight, Nordbotten, which is the city where the Grey Wardens first appeared in battle, this city was destroyed first in the second blight before anyone could even mount an offense, which to me, that seems really petty. And I don't really believe in coincidences, so I have a hard time believing that this was a coincidence. I definitely see that as like as Darkspawn getting revenge on the Grey Wardens, even though it's definitely debatable whether or not they have that level of like cognitive power. Okay, so that's the second blight. The second blight is also the blight that Emperor Draken really began to implement mages fighting. And so, he's a hero during this time. He's a hero of this blight. He's the one that helps Weishaupt and the Anderfels reclaim their land after the Darkspawn emerge. And so after this, the Grey Wardens converted to the Chantry. So those are the main things that happened in the second blight. And then in the third blight, the Grey Wardens really were able to organize a rapid defense when the Darkspawn arose again in like South Central Thedas. And they really were able to hold the Darkspawn back this time. And this was the shortest blight to this point. It's not shorter than the fifth blight, but it only lasts about 15 years, from 310 towers to 325 towers. So those are the three things I wanted to mention in the ancient history. So before we transition into more modern history, I think now would be a good time for a break.
Yeah, I totally think so. I just have one more thing that I wanted.
Oh, sure.
It very much, like, hearing all the blights together like this has really painted a picture of, like, it's not really, like, three individual wars. The battle against the Darkspawn for the Grey Wardens is kind of just this ongoing thing with bigger waves at points. And, like...
Yeah, it totally is. It's
the
constant.
in-between time is just the enemy retreating and regrouping.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
And so, like, I think it's interesting to me, like, the third blight to me would be the short, it makes sense that they're the shortest because they have this really, really strong victory at Starkhaven. Mm-hmm. And, Emperor Draken is so convincing that they become Andrastian and convert to the Chantry. And so now they're getting Chantry support, which probably bolsters their rank. So they're probably really prepared for the third blight.
That's a really good point. And I definitely agree with you. So, yeah.
So, yeah, let's go to our break.
Do you know what makes your video game bay tick?
Have you ever wondered how they stack up against all the rest of the delectable digital dates?
I'm Genesis, and we analyze and review all of your favorite video game romances.
I'm Vervada. Check out our podcast, Two Girls, One Ship, on all your favorite podcast places. Remember,
beauty is in the eye of the controller.
So, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this.
I'm listening.
Ah, you've returned. A letter arrived for you.
Well, Shelby, we have a lot to talk about here in the middle of the show. So we're starting a new segment. Our new segment is called Show Us Your Heroes, Hawks, and Heralds. And we want to see your player characters. We want to see the hero of Ferelden, your Hawks, your Inquisitors or Heralds. We want to see them, so you can send them to us. You can tweet them at us. If you're in the Discord, you can send them in the Discord, or you can email them to us at dalorecast@gmail.com. This week, we're actually going to highlight one of our heroes, Hawks, or Heralds. And so I'm going to turn it over to Shecup because she's got her hero to highlight, I believe.
Yeah, it is my hero. So today, we're highlighting mine, and mine is from Origins. So she is my hero of Ferelden, and her name is Flora Tabris. She is a city elf. She's also a warrior, and I like to describe her personality a little bit as ruthless, kind of ruthless and aggressive, but kind when it counts. She befriended all party members, especially Morrigan and Shale. Her and Morrigan were best friends, which I love. And she also romanced Zevran. I feel like they have a lot in common. Flora let Isolde sacrifice herself to save Connor. Flora also brokered peace between the elves and the werewolves. Flora sided with the mages, and she sided with Caradin in the Deep Roads. And so as of now, currently in Flora's world state, Alistair and Honora rule Ferelden together. And Alistair did have the old god baby with Morrigan. So Flora does live. She is currently researching how to end the calling. And that's a little bit about my hero.
Would you say this is your canon playthrough?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
All right. Well, again, you can send us those heroes, hawks, and heralds at any place, Twitter, on the Discord, or at our email at dalorecast@gmail.com.
And we will highlight them all on the podcast.
Yes, we will. All right. So I want to take this time to remind you about how we like to support our podcast, which there are really 3 main ways that you can do that. Now. So the first one is one we've been talking about, which is just leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. If you have an Apple account, just head over there. Even if you don't listen on Apple Podcasts, you can still go over there and leave us a review. If you leave us some kind words and a 5-star review, we will read that review on a future episode of the show. And then the second one is if you would like to join our Patreon, which you can find the link down in the episode description. There are different tiers which give you different benefits, from everything from ad-free episodes to coming and guesting on the show with us for a topic of your choice. So yeah, that's really great. And then the last thing that we are going to highlight is Spotify has now introduced a rating system as well, which is just a star-based rating system. You can go over to the Spotify app and just find our podcast, click the little rating thing, and you can give us a rating. If you like what we do, give us 5 stars. We really appreciate that. It helps the show to grow and become known, and it'll be great in supporting us.
Absolutely. And I just want to take time to mention, like, even if you can't support us financially, we totally understand that. And again, the best and most important way to support us is by telling people that you like our show. That's the best way to get a podcast out there, is through word of mouth. So if you have friends that play Dragon Age and think they would enjoy our podcast, please tell them. Please spread the word about us. And if you can support us financially, we would obviously love that as well. We do this as a hobby. This is not our job. This is very much something fun for us. So if you're able to financially support us and want to say thank you for this content that we produce for free, we would also love that. But just know that that's definitely not an obligation or anything that we're expecting. So thank you for your support.
Yes, thank you. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or just a cool idea that you want to share, you can join us on the Discord. The link is in the description. Tweet at us or send us an email. We love engaging with all of your questions and all things Dragon Age. So yeah. You ready to get back to it?
I am. Let's do it.
All right. Let's get back to these Grey Wardens.
My friend.
Swooping is bad.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, so let's talk about the 4th Blight. I feel like the 4th Blight is our catchphrase. We talk about it every episode, but
it's important.
It's very relevant to this topic.
Yes.
So as you've heard us mention before, the 4th Blight is significantly worse than the previous 3. Mostly damaged Antiva, Ravane, and the Free Marches. But Hosberg and the Anderfells was also repeatedly attacked. So the important thing to note about this blight is that the Griffons died out after this blight, which we'll talk about. We'll touch on a little bit later. I don't want to spend too much time talking about the how or the why, but instead I want to talk about the fact that this really changes the Grey Wardens as an institution, as a group, as a faction. This is almost integral to their identity, and they've now lost part of their identity, and they have to overcome this, and they have to really figure out who they are without the Grey Warden or without the Griffons. And I will be honest, I'm not sure that they really have done that. I feel like they've really been floundering ever since this blight, because they don't know who they are without the Griffons.
Isn't the Griffons, don't they share, each warden like had a bond with their specific Griffon?
Yeah, well, not every warden had a Griffon. I mean, that would just be a crazy number of Griffons, to have thousands. But they did have a lot, and each rider did have a specific bond with their Griffon. That is true.
So when they died, it's like a part of themselves died.
Right, and I mean, you have to think about it, like a lot of Grey Wardens died during the Fourth Blight. And we know all the Griffons died, and we'll get into why a little bit later, but yeah, I can imagine that it was really heartbreaking for those riders. I mean, we have a dog, we have a pet, and I can't imagine what it would be like to lose her. And a Griffon is a little bit more lifelike, a little bit more like intuitive than a dog might be, or any other kind of pet we might have today, and especially when you like fight alongside the Griffon in times of war, when it rescues you, when it saves your life, when it saves the life of your friends. I can't imagine the trauma of losing someone or something that you're that connected to.
Right.
It would be really painful.
So would it be right to say that by the end of the Fourth Blight, the Wardens are kind of a shell of what they once were?
110,000%, yes. Yeah, I think that's super accurate. And I also think, I mean, you see that in the Fifth Blight, right? Like, no one comes to help them except for Riordan at the very end. And which we can attribute some of that to Loghain, of course, but we can't just use Loghain as an excuse, because we know that King Kaelin was in communication with Empress Selene about the possibility of it being a blight. So I can't imagine that the Empress of Orlais would just say, "Oh, I never heard back from him, it's fine," when it could be something that could be coming to their country too. So I think that the fact we don't see them at all until the very end of Origins also suggests that they are a shell of what they used to be.
Right. Well, you want to just highlight quickly the Fifth Blight, and then we can move on?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that ties us in perfectly. So Fifth Blight is really only 1 year, 930 to 931 dragon. The archdemon is Arthemiel, and is defeated by conditional. It could be Alistair, it could be the hero of Ferelden, or I think it could also be Loghain.
It can.
So it could be the three of them. I personally always make sure that it's my hero of Ferelden that defeats the archdemon. I don't know, I just can't give up control to Alistair or Loghain that much. Alistair maybe, but Loghain, nah. So Fifth Blight only lasts 1 year. A lot of people don't even think it's a blight. We've established this. Your party gets virtually no help from Weishaupt. Virtually none at all. And you do it all yourself, and that's fun. So if you play Awakening, which is the DLC expansion for Origins, you can become the Warden-Commander of Ferelden, and you get Vigil's Keep, which is in Amaranthine, and you basically command it and become the Grey Warden leader in Ferelden, which is fun. It's a great DLC, but it gives us a little bit more insight into Weishaupt. You get one NPC who comes from Weishaupt to basically help you steward everything. But other than that, we still don't get very much support from Weishaupt, which is interesting. I mean...
Yeah. It's definitely something I can either tell that BioWare just hasn't developed it out and doesn't know what to do with it, and that's why we don't get anything, or they're holding out something important that's coming. And Weishaupt's going to play a big role in that.
Yeah. Here's my headcanon. I think that it started as they don't know what to do / they forgot about it, and then it transitioned after Inquisition or before Inquisition into something else is coming that's bigger for DA4. It's just my thought.
There's definitely, as tone-wise as the game and narratively, there's this big shift in DA2 that I think is one of the reasons that the game is so shocking to a lot of fans, is that, one, its tone entirely shifts. It's a lot less dark than Dragon Age Origins. And the Grey Wardens are non-existent in that game.
Well, not non-existent. I mean, you do have a former Grey Warden party member.
Right, you have a former Warden party member, and you meet them occasionally, but they don't play a key role in the story. Not like in Inquisition or Origins.
That's true. That's true. Well, that's very true.
Right, and so maybe they had wanted to move away from that, and then with the backlash of 2, they realized, oh, well, crap, well, we can't move away from this, so...
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that 2 was a specific story that they wanted to tell, because if you play the DLC, Legacy, they do have a huge role to play.
That's true.
With Corypheus' story and Janeka or Larius, whomever you decide to side with, they're both Wardens. So, that was actually my next thing that I wanted to talk about was the Legacy DLC. So, let's just move on into it a little bit. If you haven't played the Legacy DLC, this is where we first meet Corypheus. Even if you're not a fan of Dragon Age 2, I really, really do recommend playing it. Because it's so important lore-wise. It's so important for the narrative of Inquisition. So we meet Corypheus first. He's basically imprisoned in a Grey Warden prison that's deep underneath Kirkwall. And he's been imprisoned there for a long time. And the reason why Hawke gets involved is because the Grey Wardens who imprisoned him used Malcolm Hawke, Hawke's father, to imprison him. And basically, over time, Corypheus has corrupted the minds of some Grey Wardens that are hanging around, and he's on the verge of being able to get free. And he's basically convincing these Grey Wardens and a bunch of dwarves somehow that get roped into it to come after Hawke and get you to come down there and finish setting him free, basically, to free the traps that your father put him in. And so you go in and you undo all these traps, and then you have to fight Corypheus. And well, we know what happens next. He gets free, he comes back to life, and he shows up as the villain in Inquisition. So that's the real quick 2-minute version of the Legacy DLC. But the Grey Wardens are a central character in this because they're the ones that are like leading you and guiding you the whole way.
Right. Yes.
Do you have thoughts about the Legacy DLC?
I just think it plays into a lot of people are upset about Corypheus because the Legacy DLC wasn't available to everyone. It wasn't something everyone did, so I had no idea who this person was when he came in. But I think if you can play it, it's important because it really sets up Corypheus as an individual and kind of like seeing... He's really disoriented when he wakes up. He doesn't really know what's going on. He thinks he's in the Empire of Old, Tevinter, and he thinks it's kind of sad because he wakes up and he's just be like, it's so quiet, like, because he can't hear Demont. And so, yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Well, let's get back to Grey Wardens a little bit. That's most of the history that I wanted to talk about, unless you had anything else to add about Inquisition.
Not about Inquisition, but at some point between the 4th and 5th Blight, it is important to note that the Grey Wardens do get banished from Ferelden.
Oh, yeah. How could I forget?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about that?
You'll have to fill in my gaps when I mess up, but basically, if you've played the Soldier's Peak DLC in Origins...
Also very fun and interesting.
Yes. You go to this keep where this battle happened, and basically the Grey Wardens attempt to lead a rebellion against the King of Ferelden, whose name escapes me right now.
The King of Ferelden.
The King of Ferelden. And they lose. Big time. They are cored up in Soldier's Peak, and they basically lose, and the result of that is they are banished from Ferelden. And it's only under King Merrick that they're allowed to come back because of his friendship with Duncan.
Right.
Which you can read about in the book, The Calling. Right? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me.
That's right.
Look at me.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that, because I totally would have skipped over it. But I do think that DLC is also important. And I also think it's interesting that they build all this stuff into DLC. But anyway, yeah, so they get banished, and they basically get banished for trying to usurp the king, because their leader, Sophia Dryden, who actually did have a claim to the throne, but she thought that she could rule better than the current king, so she tried to overthrow him, and well, it did not work out for her.
It did not.
And in the DLC, you get to meet her, kind of, or at least something like her. So, yeah, that's also good to bring up. Well, if you don't have any other history to add or things you want to talk about, we can talk about where the Grey Wardens are now.
Yeah. So, as you know, in Inquisition, you can make a couple decisions. So, just a brief recap and spoilers for the game that is almost 10 years old.
It's 8.
The Grey Wardens come under the influence of Corypheus, who mimics something called the Calling, which is basically, it's kind of like a song that the Grey Wardens hear, and it lets them know that the Blight is about to take them. They're about to die from the Blight within them. And so, typically when a Grey Warden hears the Calling at a very old age, or an older age, they go into the deep roads and are basically like, I'm going to kill as many Darkspawn as I can before they overtake me, and that's how I'm going to end it. That whole thing, in death sacrifice. And so that's what happens. So what Corypheus does is he is able to manipulate the Grey Wardens in Orlais, and he basically makes them all hear the Calling at the same time. Well, this freaks out all the Grey Wardens, specifically Warden-Commander Clarel? Clarel, sorry. You all have to be patient with my pronunciation.
Yes, you do.
And so she, under a Venatori mage's influence, they start the idea that they're going to raise a demon army and march into the deep roads and destroy the Darkspawn before the Calling takes them all. And so the Inquisitor, with the help of a Warden, whether that be Alistair, Loghain, or Stroud, you go and you stop them, and you go into the Fade, and there's all that, and you find out that through the manipulation of Corypheus, the Wardens actually assisted in the killing of Divine Justinian V and the explosion at the Conclave. And so there's a big old decision that you're given whether you can banish the Wardens from Orlais or ally the Wardens with the Inquisition, though they would be vulnerable to corruption. Did I get it all?
You got it all. That's right. So basically, if the Inquisitor banishes the Wardens, they return to Weishaupt, and what happens, we believe, is that a battle for control of the Order erupts. If your Warden ally survived the events of Adamant, it's rumored that they are leading a rebellion to change the Order from within. Eventually, even the Grey Wardens from the northern nations begin to retreat to Weishaupt, and rumors that the Order is on the verge of vanishing begin to spread all over Thedas, while all news from Weishaupt ceases. It's interesting. And then similarly, interestingly enough, if you ally with the Grey Wardens, the southern Grey Wardens begin to slowly rebuild after helping the Inquisition stop a particularly dangerous Darkspawn incursion, and they declare that the Order must change, becoming more open to the general populace. It's rumored that the southern Grey Wardens sever ties with their leaders at Weishaupt, and that both Grey Warden factions are at war with each other. Eventually, all news from Weishaupt ceases. So they end the same way. No matter which way you choose, no matter what you do, it's rumored that there's a civil war between the Grey Wardens, no matter what. So that's where they are currently. And you know what? We've had a lot of content recently about the Grey Wardens. There are like 3 or 4 chapters into Winter Nights about Grey Wardens. There has been, in both the 2020 and 2021 short stories that they released on DA Day, there were both stories about Wardens in that. And I don't know if any of the comics mention anything about Wardens, but to me that's a lot of content regardless of the comics. So I definitely think the next game will have something to do with Wardens in some way.
Well, there's a lot going on with Darkspawn too. If we think about everything going on from DAO and like how short it is, and it's really weird. And then Awakening with the arrival of the Architect, and then Inquisition, like the fact that Corypheus is able to basically impart the Blight into a dragon and make it look like an archdemon. There's a lot going on with Darkspawn that's leading to something big, which there's only 2 old gods left, maybe 3 if speculation is true, but
right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't have any answers. This is all theory and hypothesis, but I definitely do think they will be involved in some way in the next game.
At least I hope so. I hope we get to pull up these threads and they're not just dropped.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, well, let's talk about some known Grey Wardens. So, I just wanted to mention a few known Wardens who are important in the games. This is not every Warden we know. These are just some of the highlights. So, known members. Obviously, Alistair, Anders, Blackwall, both, the original Blackwall, and potentially Tom Rainier as well. Corinius, who is the founder of the Order. Corin, who defeated one of the archdemons. Duncan, Garahel, Isaiah, Riordan, Ruth, Sasha Miri, Sophia Dryden, Utha, Stroud, Valeska, and of course, the hero of Ferelden. And then we also have some potential Wardens, people who can, through your choices in the games, become Wardens as well. So both Bethany and Carver Hawk can become Wardens. Gregory Dedrick, who is the mayor of Crestwood, who floods his town, he can become a warden, which I did not know before I did research for this. So I'll have to make sure I do that in my next playthrough.
Is that a choice you can make in his judgment?
Yeah, it has to be. Justice, as we know, is a potential Grey Warden. Loghain, Nathaniel Howe, Ogren, Sigrun, Tom Rainier, optional, and Valana. Most of those last few are from Awakening, the expansion DLC to Origins.
All right, lots of good people.
Lots of big names, yeah.
Fun fact: doesn't Garahel defeat? Isn't that last battle in Kirkwall?
No, he defeats the archdemon of the fourth blight, but I don't think it's in Kirkwall.
They just mention it's a mention point when Leandra Hawk says our family has been nobility in Kirkwall since Garahel defeated the first blight.
It's the fourth blight.
Or the fourth blight, sorry.
That's interesting that she would mention that, because it's not that long ago. Well, I guess it is. Almost 400 years. But anyways, is there anything else we wanted to mention about Grey Wardens before we move on?
I just want to say I like the Grey Wardens a lot as an organization. Mm-hmm. I think they do have their problems, but I hope that they kind of come out in a more heroic light in the next game than they did have in the past one.
I definitely agree with you. I really like them. And they've definitely done some shady things. I'm not like 100% stan or anything. But I do like them, and I think that they are kind of like, they're the first ones we meet if you've played the games chronologically. And I just think there's some sense of nostalgia when we look at them too. Like, oh, it's the first time we played this game. I don't know. So that makes me like them alone. But before we move on, I do want to mention their motto, which I forgot to talk about during Fun Facts. But their motto is: in war, victory; in peace, vigilance; in death, sacrifice. I like that a lot, especially the in peace, vigilance, and in death, sacrifice, because I think that the Grey Wardens are a group of people that are defined by their sacrifice, and they have to be, to protect Thedas from Darkspawn.
And it's like a thing about like everyone scoffs at the Grey Wardens in times of peace. Everyone just kind of like, oh, those Grey Wardens, fear-mongering. But when a truly terrible blight comes, you want them there. All right, well, you ready to move on to our side character? So who we got?
So today we've got a side character who I think is really important, but a lot of you may not know if you haven't dug into the books. So our character for today, her name is Isaiah, and she is an elven mage Grey Warden who lived during the Exalted Age and fought during the Fourth Blight. She is the main character of the book Last Flight. And you may recognize her brother's name a little bit more than hers. Her brother is Garahel, and he is the one who slayed the archdemon of the Fourth Blight. So Isaiah and Garahel both joined the Grey Wardens right before the Fourth Blight started. They grew up in an alienage and very much wanted to get out of that life and have a new adventure. So they joined the Wardens. So when Isaiah passed her joining, she became a Griffin rider. And her Griffin's name was Ravus. And Isaiah is really instrumental in the Fourth Blight. Like I said, Garahel usually gets most of the credit because he's the one who slays the archdemon, but Isaiah is arguably just as important. Her first battle during this blight is she's sent with a group of other wardens to Antiva City to rescue members of the royal court from the Darkspawn attack and from betrayal from the inside. They do indeed rescue a few members of the court, including Amadis Vale, who you should recognize that last name. But Amadis is the leader of a mercenary group called the Ruby Drakes, and Amadis would go on to have a romantic relationship with Garahel. And they also rescue an Antivan Crow named Kalian, who is a blood mage. And most everybody else, unfortunately, dies during this battle, but they do rescue those two. So Isaiah is the person whose idea it was to create the modified Aravels that transport civilians from Wycombe to Starkhaven. We've talked about this in our Free Marches episode. It's really an important plot line during the 4th Blight, so go back and listen to those if you want more info on it. But throughout the Blight, the situation gets worse and worse. Eventually, Isaiah begs Kalian to teach her blood magic, and he does. And Isaiah then leads a mission where a group of Grey Wardens is sent to collapse a Darkspawn tunnel. In the process, one of the Griffons, whose name is Shrike, is infected with the Darkspawn taint. So instead of killing the Griffin as they're supposed to do, Isaiah develops a way to put Griffins through the joining via blood magic to force them to accept the taint rather than just mindlessly rage. The Griffins were not only immune to the taint, but they were 10 times stronger than normal Griffins and could ignore even grave injuries. And this is after they go through their modified process. But they also become uncontrollably aggressive in the presence of Darkspawn and require a mage to use blood magic to basically force them to cooperate and listen to orders, which is really a big change from what Griffins were like before this. So after she develops this modified joining ritual, Isaiah is disgusted by what she's done to Shrike, and she vows to herself, like, I'm never gonna do this again. I'm gonna hide it and just hope nobody figures it out. But under orders from the First Warden, she is ordered to put almost all of the Griffins through the joining, which is really unfortunate. But, you know, it's basically follow orders or get cast out from the Wardens, and, you know, she doesn't really have anywhere to go, so she does it. And the battles rage on. Eventually, the 4th Blight ends, and Garahel is the one who slays the Archdemon. So, after attending his funeral outside Starkhaven, Isaiah is recalled to Weishaupt because many of the Griffins have started dying due to an unknown sickness, and she has expertise in the Griffins. So she returns, and while examining them, she realizes that it was her joining ritual that caused the sickness. And it's infecting and killing not only the joined Griffins, but all of them, even the baby ones. So Isaiah goes all over Thedas, searching for a cure for the Griffins. She goes back to Kalian, asking him for help via blood magic. And he basically says, like, I can't, I don't do that anymore. Like, I'm not into blood magic. You know, you've got to figure this out on your own. Ultimately, she realizes there's no way to save the living Griffins. But she takes the very last clutch of eggs that a Griffin has laid, and she purifies it from the taint. And she takes the taint of the Darkspawn into herself through blood magic. And so what she does is she basically preserves these eggs via magic in this cave that's hidden away in the Anderfells. And she then leaves a series of clues hidden throughout Weishaupt, which only an elven mage would be able to decipher. And she does this because she wants to make sure that anyone who would awaken the Griffins would understand the precious cost of freedom. So she does all this. She figures out a way to heal these eggs, and she really sees her duty as finished. And before she leaves on her calling, Isaiah departs on her Griffin for one last flight.
It's sad.
It's very sad, but I also think it's full circle and cyclical because, you know, she does do this. Like, it is kind of her fault. But also, you know, and in the end, she figures out a way to make sure that eventually some Griffons can come back to the Grey Wardens.
Right. And I think it implies important abilities because she's able to take the taint from a living creature. Or not a living creature, but I mean from the eggs.
An egg.
Like,
yeah.
It's some type of creature. And I think the fact that at some point, if your hero Ferelden survives the Blight, you think Grey Wardens would be asking, okay, how? Like, especially some of the senior ups, the Warden-Commander in Teventer, in Orlais, like, they would just be like, okay, what?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, I find it really hard to believe that the news of the Dark Ritual would remain secret.
Unless they brush it off as not really a blight in the first place.
Right, which I think is more dangerous than letting the Dark Ritual.
I agree, but I think
known.
I agree, but I think it's possible.
Right. And so, but Morrigan's ritual is very similar, I think, in like at least effect to her ritual. And so perhaps like what? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just gonna say like the taking of the taint and like purifying this creature.
Right, exactly, which is what Morrigan does to the old god in Dragon Age Origins. And so it could be that this could be the hero Ferelden's answer to the cure to the calling. A way for Grey Wardens to retire and this not to be a doom. But we don't know.
Yeah, there's so much we don't know. But you're right. I think that there is some similarities there. And I definitely hope that the hero of Ferelden, if they survive, that they run across Isaiah's research or notes or journals or something, because that could definitely help them in figuring out how to cure the calling.
And I really like Isaiah because I like the focus of the story that you don't have to be the killer of the Archdemon to be an important Grey Warden. Or to affect the Blight.
Right, and like you also don't have to be the greatest tactical hero ever to still be a hero. You can be a quiet hero without necessarily being like the flashy leader like Garahel is. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's who you are, but that's not who you have to be.
There's room and need for all people. So anything else about Isaiah?
That's all I've got.
All right. Well, I think we're done here. And so thank you for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. Thanks for listening to the Dragon Age Lorecast. As always, you can find us on Twitter at DALorecast. If you have any lore questions, topics to unpack, or side character suggestions, email them to us at dalorecast@gmail.com. The Dragon Age Lorecast is a part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club. You can join the Robots Radio Network Discord by clicking the link in our episode description. If you enjoyed our show, we'd love it if you'd subscribe and give us a review. See you next time.
Once upon a time, 27 years after the bombs fell, there were two people, a vault dweller and a California girl. They met and sparks flew. That's when things got interesting. Once Upon a Wasteland is their story. Follow Elizabeth Kirby and Odessa Valdez as they pursue their happily ever after in the post-apocalyptic Appalachian wasteland of Fallout 76. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and many other podcasting platforms. Once Upon a Wasteland, a Fallout 76 love story. Available now.
How well do you know your video game lovers?
Have you ever wondered how your video game bays stack up against all the other delectable digital dates?
I'm Genesis, the girl whose motto in life is love, laugh, tequila. And on Two Girls, One Ship, we analyze, rate, and review all that the world of video game romances has to offer.
And I'm Vervada, the hopeless romantic cat lady and lifelong gamer.
But you should know that our podcast centers on character and romance analysis and doesn't shy away from exploring the fun of physical connection.
Or from the deep emotional connections built between two characters, using specific in-game dialogue and the overall narrative journey. So join the Two Girls, One Ship shipsters, and remember,
beauty is in the eye of the controller.